Hi Pod fans, Max here. Football Weekly is supported by Peacock. The Premier League is back and Peacock has exclusive live coverage every match week. Don't miss thrilling live action from the top 6 clubs and more as the competition gets started, and this season you can stream even more with Peacock's live streams of matches airing on NBC. Plus stay up to date on the latest news with Premier League TV on Peacock channels. Your always-on destination for commentary, analysis, highlights and more. So get ready for an exciting new season and sign up for Peacock now. Go to peacocktv.com to get started.
The Guardian.
Hello and welcome to the Guardian Football Weekly. Another session in the bank for Harry Kane. But is a training session if no one is there to see it except the social media manager? Backpage news of almost every paper, almost every day this week. Is that because it's huge news or nothing else is happening? Arsenal move for Ødegaard and Ramsdale. Are they the answers? Is the question, what do we need to do to still finish 8th? We'll look ahead to the second weekend of the Premier League. In the EFL, as fans boo the knee, we ask what responsibility clubs, players and managers have to call it out. UEFA have a £7 billion post-COVID relief plan. Who's it for and what will it do? There's all that, some questionable new third kits, edible cups, your questions, and that's today's Guardian Football Weekly. On the panel today, Barry Glendenning, hello.
Hello, Max.
Simon Burnton, hello.
Hello.
And hello, Johnny Lou.
Hello, Max.
Right, let's start with the weekend's Premier League games then, with the big stories that surround them. Wolves v Spurs is on Sunday. Nuno going back to Molineux. Could Harry Kane be in the side for this one? He hasn't travelled with the squad to go to Portugal for their Europa Conference League playoff tie with Paços de Ferreira. His people leaked all his thoughts to the Telegraph yesterday. He tweeted a picture of him kicking a football with no one near him, saying another session in the bank. There was a tweet from our mate John Bruin saying that probably time Harry Kane went on the record to tell us what he actually wants to do. We all know anyway, and these briefings make him look a wally and have achieved very little. City have just let him get on with it too. Johnny, what's your take on this situation?
It just seems like a really meek way of getting out of a contract that he seems pretty tied to, and Tottenham and Daniel Levy have kind of run rings around him. He's played all his cards, and now he's in the Europa Conference League squad, and even if he's not travelling to Portugal, you know, he's turning up for work, and it feels like his attempt to get out is blowing itself out slightly. The
role of agents in football is something that we want to explore in a pod soon, like properly. But our default setting, I guess, Simon, is they're all bad, especially the super agent. You know, super agents are bad. Does this story suggest that actually, if you are a good footballer, having a super agent might not be a bad thing?
Well, certainly having an agent isn't a bad thing. And giving a good gig to your brother or your dad is fine, and you may love them and trust them. But fundamentally, this issue has arisen because Kane mishandled his contract negotiations, failed to put in useful clauses for foreseeable situations, and is relying on gentlemen's agreements rather than a legally enforceable contract. And you know that's down to his decision to let his brother do the negotiating rather than someone who, I mean, I don't want to impugn his brother, who may be an extremely capable man, but rather than someone who's very experienced in contract negotiations and really knows what they're doing and how to deal with the people they're dealing with. You know, I'm not sure about the super agents. There are some fat cats that have perhaps had access to a bit too much cream, but definitely professional agents, former footballers, might come in handy rather than siblings.
Barry, do you think this is an interesting story? Are there interesting parts to it, or are you just very much like, you know, can't we talk about some actual football, for example?
I think it's simultaneously interesting and quite tedious and dull. Just the whole dance that's going on, and as Johnny says, Harry Kane, it's difficult to see how he could possibly have made a bigger pig's ear of all this. You know, you said at the earlier that there's sort of a perception that agents are bad, and do you mean bad people, bad for the game, or bad for the players they represent? Because if you're trying to weasel out of a 5 or 6 year contract, and it's your brother who seems quite inexperienced who's trying to help you do that, then yeah, you need an agent, however bad in inverted commas they might be.
The other thing was Harry Kane, his tweet, another session in the bank. I mean, I was quite entertained at the idea that he's doing sessions in the bank now. Obviously, he's been refusing to go to training, and he's been concentrating on other matters. But yeah, he obviously didn't have a photographer with him at the bank, so he had to illustrate it with an old photo of him kicking a ball. But yeah, I thought that it was interesting, him revealing what he's up to these days.
Yeah, I mean, I think if Kane really wanted out, if he really wanted to force it through, he could play dirty. I mean, he could really kind of burn the town down. If you turn yourself as a player into such a toxic influence, that you kind of have to be got rid of for the good of the team, then that's a way that many players have used to force a move in the past. But I'm not necessarily sure that Kane has that in his locker. Do we see him kind of going to the papers and kind of selling dirt about his teammates? That kind of thing, those sort of dirty tricks. I don't really think he's got that in him. I mean, the thing about agents as well. I mean, we kind of see agents as the unique fount of all evil in the game. But if you're negotiating a contract with Real Madrid or Man United or Spurs, big clubs are going to try to screw you over just as much as the agents are going to try to screw the clubs over. They're more the symptom of kind of football's basic venality and lack of trust, culturally speaking, than the cause of that.
Johnny, you wrote a really interesting piece about Heung-min Son.
I love Heung-min Son. Who doesn't love Heung-min Son? Yeah.
Well, I agree. I think I found really interesting about it was just the sort of dichotomy between his ludicrous fame that we know exists but we don't see in South Korea, and his sort of virtual anonymity just wandering around Hampstead.
He is obviously this massive star in Korea, and from what you hear from people out there, journalists, that it's on a level that we can't even really compute. And yet, when he's over here, even he scores the winning goal against the champions in the opening game of the season, and all the headlines are about Harry Kane. It's all he's proved that Tottenham proved they can play without Harry Kane. Harry Kane in the stands, and it's weird how he's kind of, this guy should be the star of the team and certainly deserves to get a crack at being the star of this team. If Kane leaves. And yet, for some reason, he doesn't really fit into, I guess, our perception of what a star footballer should look like and carry themselves. It is kind of an interesting dichotomy. But I definitely think he deserves a little bit more love because he's a fantastic player.
I do have my dog's best friend is a dog who is owned by a man a guy who works very closely with Son, and has done for a number of years.
Say that one more time.
Yeah, it's an unusual introduction. Yeah. So my
Shaggy dog story.
My dog's best friend is also a dog, obviously, but this dog's owner has worked with Son quite closely for some time, and just the look in this guy's eye when he talks about him. I mean, he clearly adores Son, and he doesn't feel the same way about many other people that he has worked closely with. Son is obviously, he's not just one of those players who looks like a good guy on the pitch. He's clearly a really, really great human. So yeah, I have a lot of time for him. The other thing about the Kane transfer, if I may just return to it, is that if Kane had been sold at the start of the summer, I think Tottenham's owners were terrified of looking bad, having just been embroiled in this whole European Super League business, and they were really worried about optics, about everything, and selling Kane at the beginning of the summer would have been unimaginable. But I think we're getting to a stage now where they could sell Kane without looking better, like with Kane carrying all the bad will. So it may be an option for them.
Shouldn't your dog's best friend be you? Because a dog is a man's best friend. Right. So it should be you rather than another dog.
No one says a man is a dog's best friend, do they?
My best friend is a man.
Who is your best friend, Johnny?
Probably Ed. Hi, Ed.
Hi, Ed. It's worth saying the Lou family were in full voice. Barry hasn't adopted any young children for part one that you may have heard, especially while we're talking about Harry Kane. They sound well, Johnny, as well. It's worth pointing out.
In fine voice.
They're in fine voice, aren't they? Great to have fans back. Great to have babies back in the podcast, isn't it? Let's move on to Arsenal-Chelsea then. Matt says, now Arsenal have signed Ødegaard and Ramsdale. Are they going to rise up the league and finish higher than 8th and almost certainly lower than 6th? What do you make of these signings, Baz?
I'd be slightly concerned about Ramsdale insofar he's a bit of a Jonah, isn't he? He's had 2 relegations in 2 seasons. I think Arsenal do need a goalkeeper. Bernd Leno has been pretty unconvincing in recent times. Didn't cover himself in glory against Brentford in the opening game of the season as well. I don't know how good Aaron Ramsdale is, if he's much of an upgrade, but I imagine he will be in the team before too long, and then it's up to him to establish himself. I think Odegaard's a good signing. He will probably play alongside Emile Smith-Rowe. I think that was kind of how they had him in the second half of last season. The two of them sort of playing as joint number 10s. So yeah, they're good signings. Whether they'll be enough to have Arsenal zooming up the table remains to be seen. I mean, Arsenal will inch their way up the table. I'm just not sure how high they'll go. I think the fact that they've no European football should help, and if it doesn't help, I imagine Mikel Arteta will probably get the sack before too long.
See, I don't know if Ramsdale's any better than Leno, Simon. I
kind of said that. I don't.
Yeah. No, well, I agree with Barry, is how I should say. Goalkeepers are such important players. I mean, they are they're the most important player on the pitch, I think, and actually we don't really talk about them as much as we probably should. And if I was an Arsenal fan looking at those as your 2 keepers, you go, well, they're both okay, but I don't see either of them getting you out of a pickle.
I do think that Arsenal are spending a lot of money on kind of ho-hum Premier League players, and that sounds terribly critical, and I don't mean it to be. They're very decent, but 30 million here and 50 million there, you would imagine would be getting you a different level of footballer.
Yeah, and Johnny, what sort of reaction do you think they'll get, and how quickly will that turn at the Emirates?
Yeah, I mean, as we know, like things can turn at the Emirates very quickly, and that works in either direction. I remember, I think it was the first game of the 15-16 season when Arsenal lost at home to Aston Villa, and it was the mood was mutinous. Like people were absolutely furious. It felt like the end of days, certainly for the Wenger era. And then they just kind of calmly won the next 3 or 4 games, and the crisis was over. And then the crisis was averted for another 2 or 3 months. At which point, the crisis then blows up again in a different area of the squad. So, it's weird, the weirdest, but actually quite plausible thing that they could beat Chelsea on Sunday. They are that crazy a team. And the Ødegaard signing is clearly an attempt to try to kind of unglue this horribly formulaic, attacking patterns that they were trying to create last season, which just looked like they looked so insipid going forward. And Ødegaard is very good at kind of ungumming the gears in the way that Ozil was, just finding that pass, finding the pass before the pass, finding that little kind of pocket of space on the half turn. It's kind of a cliche now that he finds that pocket of space, but he kind of releases players in tight spots. And their kind of transfer policy this season has been kind of according to a clear pattern, right? They've tried to sign players in their early 20s, and they've not been afraid of paying top dollar for them. I think Ben White's 23, I think Odegaard's 22, Ramsdale I'm not sure, I think he's about 22, and it might not look like a genius plan, but it is at least a plan, and that's something that has not always been present at Arsenal in the last few years.
You imagine, Barry, that Romelu Lukaku would have been watching Ivan Toney and Mbeumo versus the Arsenal defence and think, this is like, what's my dream first game? I mean, we said Arsenal is the dream first game for everybody, but if he does start, or if he does come on, I mean, that will be fun to watch.
Yeah, Pablo Mari and Ben White had a pretty torrid evening against Brentford. Mari in particular, Ben White, I think, lost the majority of his 7. I think there was 7 duels with Ivan Toney, aerial duels, and he lost 4 of them. So if Romelu Lukaku saw that, he will be licking his lips. There's more to his game than just being a big battering ram, a lot more. But Ivan Toney obviously had Mbeumo playing off him, and they ran amok, and there's every chance Chelsea's forwards could do the exact same thing.
In other Chelsea news, Michy Batshuayi's joined Besiktas on loan until the end of the season, after extending his contract with Chelsea until 2023 for some reason that I don't quite understand. His 5th loan signing since joining Chelsea. The announcement video featured him in a very low-budget Batman, sort of like when my Granny Moira made me a Chewbacca suit, and I just I didn't look Chewbacca. I just looked like a cuddly bear. I guess it does look a bit like Batman.
Well, I mean, it's really good video because they had the mood and the stadium, the dark, and the insignia, and it was shaping up to be really good. And then it was a bit pound shop, the old Batman suit. I think you can always judge a Batman suit, the quality of it, by does it have abs and pectoral, inbuilt abs and pectoral muscles, and do the ears stick up straight? But he had the curly out ears. And do you have boots, or is it just a pair of trainers sticking out the end of your trousers?
It's like a sad Batman who's been kept in captivity, so his ears have just flopped down because he doesn't have any reason for his sticking up ears. Anyway, we wish Batshuayi luck. While we're on Chelsea, Barry, I think a lot of us were really shocked and saddened about the news about Sean Locke passing away at 58. And I know you thought he was an incredibly funny man.
Yeah, he's a big Chelsea fan, and they tweeted a message of condolence to him and his family yesterday after his death, which I think caught a lot of people by surprise. He had been ill for quite some time. And, Twitter is often a complete cesspit, but yesterday just loads and loads of people fondly reminiscing about Sean Locke and swapping stories about him and posting his best of clips. He was quite the national treasure. I was a bit taken aback by just how popular he was, and it's very sad, and he'll be a huge loss. He was a hugely popular figure on the comedy circuit.
Yeah, I interviewed him a number of times, actually. And one of those interviewees that, you had to be on because he was so quick and so dry, and obviously, just so much quicker than I am, and just, you knew that if you said something silly, or just not quite right. He would just he would just say, all right, I'm having that. And, especially in Soccer AM, which was a kind of, everybody was there willing things like that to happen. But yeah, I didn't know him very well at all, but very lovely bloke. And some of those clips, the tiger that went for a pint, him reading that is just, I was watching that this morning, just hilarious. So only listen, our thoughts, obviously with his wife and his kids and his mates as well. Sean Locke, who sadly passed away yesterday, age of 58. That'll do for part one. We'll be back in a sec. Welcome to part two of the Guardian Football Weekly. Other Premier League fixtures, West Ham, Leicester. There is some rumours about a takeover. Philip Beard was on TalkSport. He was involved with QPR. He says he has proved the funds. Golden Sullivan says he hasn't. So you may make of that what you will. Everton, Leeds. Liverpool play Burnley. Man City play Norwich. Difficult opening 2 games for Norwich. Liverpool, then City, then Leicester next. On the 4th of their 4th game on the 11th of September away at Arsenal. So that's their easy one, isn't it? Well, Norwich v Arsenal is easy for both sides. Max has been in touch. As someone who has strong views on football kits, how do you feel about Man City's new 3rd kit? And Michael says, how many points should Man City be deducted for their new 3rd kit? Puma released a selection of 3rd kits yesterday. I don't know, Simon, if you've studied them, but they are... And everyone's saying how bad they are, so part of me wants to be contrarian, but they really aren't nice, are they?
Their design is not offensive. They don't have garish colours, clashing elements. They look like football trading tops. They don't look like football kits because the club crest is woven into the fabric rather than like loud and proud on the shirt. But I guess I don't find them. I think there are many more offensive kits. But they say the team name. The team name is written upon them in very slightly smaller font than the sponsor's name, and the sponsor's name is always bigger than the team emblem. But just having them one on top of the other, it's like it changes who these players are representing somehow. It makes them look like they're playing for the sponsors.
Well, yes, Fenerbahce Avis does look like what someone who works at the car rental firm at Fenerbahce Airport, if that's a place,
yes, might be
would have to wear before you got your Vauxhall Corsa, and Uber Eats, Marseille Uber Eats. Once again, that is a delivery cyclist cycling around Marseille with a pizza, isn't it? Anyway, they're pretty poor, I think.
I think that they're so bad that they feel like they might have collectible value in the years to come.
Right, yeah.
Like, I think they might be going down that road because, they're really bad. I don't generally have thoughts about kits. It's not a thing that I've ever really been exercised by. But part of me thought like these are going to become iconic. Maybe like initially for the wrong reasons, but then in the fullness of time, who cares why they became iconic? They're going to be quite sought after.
Are you thinking Antiques Roadshow?
Right.
When in 50 years' time or 100 years' time, when they say if you had the Fenerbahce kit as well, this would be worth 1,000 squillion Bitcoin. As some cryogenically frozen posh man's head
in a cravat,
in a flying cravat, moves across to Fiona Bruce's head that is encrusted in, I don't know,
a big glass case. I think it's suspended in liquid.
Yeah, Fiona Bruce's head in a big glass. Absolutely right. Welcome to Waltham Abbey. Some news from Man City. City Extra, who are a kind of official supporters Twitter post, sent out this great tweet saying, official, Manchester City have confirmed fans will not be forced into eating their edible coffee cup and will also have the option to place the cups into composting waste streams if preferred. I went to the City website and it says this, for the first time on campus. Campus is not a word for, come on, that's your first mistake. Is it the first time on campus after Freshers Week? An edible coffee cup will also be introduced. This fantastic and innovative solution provides an amazing solution to waste. Just eat your cup. These will be trailed alongside our full barista service of hot drinks outside the stadium in City Square and opposite the West Entrance. Fans will have the option to put these cups into our composting waste stream if preferred. Producer Joel says, if you are going to City Norwich, send a picture of you eating the cup. Would be great. On the radio yesterday, Barry, we were debating, is the cup also coffee flavoured? Or can you say, I'd like a cappuccino in the pork cup? Like, what flavour's the cup?
Do we know what the cups are made of? I mean,
they're made of aqueous paper, I'm reading.
Okay.
Yeah.
They can't be made of chocolate, can they? They can't be made of something nice. They can't be made of mince, can they? It's like a lasagna that's fashioned into the shape of a cup.
Because if you start nibbling at the cup while there's still loads of coffee in it and get a bit carried away, you're going to very good chance you could scald yourself because you devour the cup before drinking the content.
They could be made of like a pie crust.
That's true. Who's gonna? I mean, that is a real low estimation of a City fan, Barry, who would eat a cup before drinking the liquid out of the cup. I have faith that most people will finish the drink.
And if you must have a nibble, start at the top, for God's sake.
All the trouble is
work your way down.
But what happens if by eating the cup, you get thirsty? I mean, this is a clever plan, isn't it? You're just an endless cycle. You can never leave. Palace play Brentford, Villa Newcastle. Benjamin says, I love Barry to bits. Please let him know it's San Maximin, not San Maximum. Okay, Barry?
I know it's San Maximin.
Okay, but there you are, Benjamin.
Did I call him San Maximum?
I mean, they sound very similar when you say them.
Isn't it San Maximin?
It is, yes, maybe it is. Yes, it is actually.
Like I say, I say potato, you say potato, but only one of us is right.
Keith says, I'm hoping Ethan Ampadu to Newcastle just to hear Geordies pronounce his name. Can the pod think of any more pleasing combination of player name and accent? You are right about Ethan Ampadu in Geordie. I was practicing it this morning. Yeah, very nice. Almost as if Ian Beale signed for Wales. That's sort of the dream, isn't it? Brighton, Watford. Simon, you're a Watford fan. We all said they'd be relegated. We were wrong, weren't we? Were we wrong?
Well, certainly last week was encouraging. Our last two Premier League seasons, we played Brighton on the first day, and they've kind of been a bellwether fixture. The first of those years, we very comfortably beat them and finished the season 11th, and the second, we were very comfortably beaten and got relegated. So it'll be interesting to see how we do in this one. I feel that Watford have enough decent attackers and enough decent defenders to be competitive this season. Though actually it was the midfield that decided last week's game against Aston Villa, which Watford controlled for the first hour and then had to make a couple of substitutions. And as soon as you scratched the surface, they didn't really have the quality with the players who came off the bench.
Who's your first choice midfield?
So last week we had Etebo, Kutska and Cleverley. We also have a guy we bought this summer called Imran Louza, which is an unfortunate name for a footballer. But Gosling was the guy we bought off the bench, who is he's an interesting footballer in that he has the knack that you sometimes hear talked about on in commentary of arriving in the box at the right time. Chances fall to him, but other than that, he's no good at all. So he's a useful player to have in the squad because he can score goals from midfield, but what he can't do is kind of contribute to a team dominating midfield.
My big question is I'm not saying Watford will get relegated or they're certain to get relegated, but if they stay up, who makes way for Fulham next season?
As in, who will go down?
Yeah, I mean, basically that's the pact, isn't it? Watford go down, Fulham go up. Or the vice versa every season.
I do think the relegation is going to be hotly contested this season. I think there's what surprised me about the absolute unanimity of predictions that Watford will get relegated was, well, firstly, that Watford ended last season so spectacularly in the Championship, I didn't really understand why anyone would be predicting that, say, Brentford, who were significantly poorer last season, would now be better than Watford. But the main issue was that there are so many teams who can go down this year. For any one of them, for everyone to decide that any one of them is going down, didn't make any sense to me.
It was based largely on ignorance, Simon.
Yeah, I'd agree with that. I think I had them to finish bottom just because I didn't really know anything about them and presumed they wouldn't be very good.
Fair enough, I suppose.
Look, we're nothing if not we're not honest, on this podcast. I think we're meant to impart knowledge to people listening about things, not how this works at that level. Meanwhile, the EFL keeps happening, doesn't it? Fulham, West Brom, Bournemouth all started predictably well. 7 points from 3 games. Stoke, QPR, Blackburn all had the same record. In the Fulham game, a number of Millwall fans booed taking the knee. Gary Rowett's post-game comments were interesting. He said, "What we need at the moment is we need the authorities to help clubs out and find a better way to unify people. I don't want to comment on individual people's decisions to do that, but we need to find a way to unify people. And at the moment, 20 seconds, 30 seconds in a game is causing such a rift and a divide in football." And I guess the question, Johnny, is it is easier for me sitting in my spare room to call out people booing taking the knee than it is for a manager of a football team of whom a significant number of their fans boo taking the knee. But, you still have to take a stand, is what I would say.
Yeah, and I think back to when but the Burnley fans, a few Burnley fans flew that banner the season before last now. That flew that banner from the plane, and Ben Mee, he just marched straight in front of the camera and said, "This is not on. We don't want this at Burnley." And he kind of roundly condemned it and took the lead in doing that, which was brave and it is commendable. And people could say, well, that's what you should be doing, but it does take a certain courage to be able to do that. Gary Rowett clearly feels like his need to. I mean, I don't know what he personally thinks about this, but clearly his need to get the fans on side and to be well thought of by the people that are paying his wages every week, for him has outweighed I guess any kind of moral aspect to the gesture that some Millwall fans are making. And while he may feel that kind of secures his position in the short term, I definitely wouldn't want him at my club at any point. And I think there are a lot of fans in this country who might well feel the same way.
And actually, Carlisle fans, a number of them booed taking the knee, and the chief exec of Carlisle issued a statement the next day saying, "Look, for over a year, our players have made their personal choice to perform this simple act of protest against discrimination and racist behaviour. There can be no doubt as to why the players are taking the knee and what it represents in a footballing context. This is personally important for our players. We ask again that any players that wish to express themselves in this way are respected and supported. After over a year away from being together at games, today was an opportunity to unite with friends, family, and just as importantly as Carlisle United football community once again. For the fans who supported our players taking the knee, thank you. We encourage the small number that opposed our players making their simple and honest gesture to reflect long and hard and think on the message you sent to our players today after that year away." So it is possible, as you said, Ben Mee, I know the Cambridge manager and the CEO came out really vocally against it when Cambridge fans did it. It's happened in other parts of the country as well.
Well, it's quite interesting that, Ben Mee's very eloquent response to the banner flying over Turf Moor contrasted sharply with Sean Dyche's refusal to criticise Burnley fans for booing players taking the knee at the weekend. So I thought that was quite interesting. And then Gary Rowett's refusal to tweak the lion's tail, as they say down at the Den. He says it's causing a rift and a divide in football, and it's not, Gary. The rift and the divide in football is there and has been there for a very long time. This booing of the knee is just shining a light on it, and long may it continue. It has been made abundantly clear time and time and time again last season, during the summer, that this is nothing to do with bloody Marxism or whatever. It's a gesture against racism. if you're booing that gesture, if you can't just stay quiet for 5 seconds, 10 seconds, I don't, I'm pretty clear in my mind what that makes you. And I think it's something Gary Rowett should have addressed.
Completely agree with that. Portsmouth and Burton with 100% record so far in League One. Fleetwood, Doncaster, Shrewsbury, no points after 3 games. I watched Cambridge United play Plymouth on the iFollow. It's fascinating, isn't it? The how biased we watch football matches as fans. Because after the game, so many Plymouth fans messaged me to say how Cambridge are the biggest cheats in world football and are massive shithouses. And I don't even know what they're talking I just didn't even know what they're talking about. So like clearly I'm totally biased as well. I mean, they deserved to beat us, and we had one attack in the second half and got a penalty, and that was it. And they hit the bar in injury time, and we cleared one off the line in injury time. They also scored a goal that was disallowed about 10 minutes. It should have been, it was offside, but it was disallowed. Honestly, I reckon 5 minutes, like literally after it had gone in. They celebrated, the ball was back at the touchline. Our players were running over to the linesman, and eventually he just put his flag up. Like it was like he was on delay. Anyway, I enjoyed it tremendously. Forest Green started very well in League Two. Oldham Athletic, bottom, 0 points in 3 games. That'll do for part 2. We'll do the 7 billion post-COVID fund from UEFA, and also some slightly more accessible things in part 3. Welcome to part 3 of the Guardian Football Weekly. Tariq Panja, our mate from the New York Times, they're reporting that cash-strapped European clubs are going to be offered access to £7 billion. UEFA's negotiated with leading banks. It'll form the key pillar of their post-COVID recovery plan. Barry, what does this mean? Who gets the money? And all those questions.
Well, there's £7 billion pounds up for grabs, or euros, I'm not sure which. And it's basically available to teams who play in the major European club competitions, so the Europa League, or the Champions League, Europa League, and the new one. What's it called again? The
Conference.
Yeah, the Europa Conference. And so any team that avails themselves of these funds would have to pay the money back, presumably with a rate of interest, a VIG, and that money would come from their future earnings in these European competitions. So UEFA are in talks with banks and investment firms to come up with the money, and they plan to create a rating scheme which would see how much various clubs are allowed to receive. So they would, say Paris Saint-Germain is probably the worst example I could possibly have thought of. Yeah.
You don't need any money.
Manchester
I've done
United,
that one.
Say, for example, they're likely to make the knockout stages, reasonably likely to make the knockout stages of Champions League, so they'd be entitled to X amount. A team that has no chance, really, of getting to the knockout stage would be only be allowed to borrow significantly less. But the banks and investment firms, I think, are willing to put up the money because they're more or less guaranteed to get it back because of this rating system, and because the money would come out of future earnings from European competitions rather than just relying on the clubs to pay them back when they might not be able to do so otherwise.
I think I understood.
If I was a fan of, Derby County, or maybe like a fan of Bury or Macclesfield, and I was watching Europe's elite clubs getting bailed out with this $7 billion fund, I would feel sick to my stomach. This money obviously is going to clubs who are feeling a lot of acute financial pain right now, largely as a result of their own financial mismanagement, and an inability to plan for the future. And they're essentially, they're getting a big check to reward themselves for their lack of prudence, while smaller clubs all around Europe, actually, who really need the money, are not going to get a penny. It stinks.
I did think so. The one sentence that I copy and pasted from the article was the one that said, to determine the amount clubs that are eligible to receive, UEFA will create a rating profile for them based on their likely income from the Champions League, the Europa League and the Conference League. And it just made me wonder what UEFA is and who they work for, and whether they are a governing body that oversees European club football and that works to protect all professional football clubs in Europe, or whether they organise competitions and work to protect those competitions.
So they're interested in the kind of the 25 to 30 clubs that are going to play in its competitions, in its main competitions in perpetuity, and it's shit scared of FIFA. It was shit scared by the Super League breakaway, and it's essentially tried to kind of get those few dozen clubs on side, without which it basically has no future. So kind of everything.
Is that because it fears the Super League happening again? I mean, I've read lots of pieces about how, there isn't the Super League, but PSG, Chelsea and Man City spending this money and no one else being able to do it is a Super League in just a more subtle way, and that eventually it'll get there. So UEFA's, all their planning is to try and make sure that doesn't happen again, right?
Yeah, or to make it happen themselves. I mean, UEFA are on kind of, there's lots of talk that some of the reforms they're going to be planning in the next few years are going to essentially create a de facto Super League. And then, there is FIFA, which kept its powder dry this time, but according to a lot of well-placed sources, were kind of on the fence for a lot of it, and they were sort of kind of looking at the weather and trying to see which way it would go. But if there was another concerted breakaway effort, it's very possible that they would try and get FIFA on side. And that's kind of UEFA's main existential fear, that FIFA, in concert with some of the big clubs, are going to pull the rug out from under them in effect. And if you look at pretty much everything they do as through the prism of trying to avert that happening, stuff like this makes a lot more sense.
Could you argue that the Conference League is actually a good thing because UEFA are there for giving opportunities for teams that wouldn't get European football, and therefore sort of helping them financially? Or is that too sort of naive and sweet of me to think that?
I don't know a huge amount about the financial settlement of the Conference League, but I think the idea of it is actually not terrible. The idea that if you're the champions of Albania or San Marino, you're not ever going to get the chance to progress past the second qualifying round of the Champions League. So here is something that is, I guess, a little bit more suited for your level, but still might land you a trip to the Stadio Olimpico or to the Tottenham Hotspur Stadium at some point. I think competitively, I can't think of too many massive objections to it. But like I said, I don't know a lot about the finances of it.
Keaton says, since Johnny Lou's cricket article is getting immense popularity in India, has there been any non-football article by others which unexpectedly gave them more limelight than the football articles? What did you say, Johnny, about the cricket? Apart from India are better than us.
Oh well, I wrote a report from Lords on Monday, which was tweeted by Harsha Bogle, the Indian cricket pundit, and to his 9 million followers. At which point, I turned my phone off for the evening. Actually, he tweeted that. I wonder if Jonathan Liu knows that his article is being shared all over WhatsApp in India. To which I replied, my Son Heung-min column, which I thought, So yeah, that was an interesting evening.
Oh, pressure on your next tweet. That's the key, isn't it? You've got to try and bring Indian cricket and football together some way that I can't think of off the top of my head. Andy says there were 91 episodes of Skippy. Do you four not feel obliged to do the 92nd episode to fit in with the football pyramid before Max gets transported? I don't. Is it bad, Barry? I can't. He was sort of like Lassie, but a kangaroo, right? I mean, he saved the day.
You'd Lassie, you'd Flipper. He was the aquatic Skippy. And then you'd Skippy. And basically, how many episodes were there? 91?
91, yeah.
That's a lot of small boys falling down wells and mine shafts and other sort of holes for him to rescue, because it was basically the same plot every single episode. But and you also had Gentle Ben, didn't you? The bear. There was a bear version.
Yeah, he was on one of those sort of fun boats in the Everglades. But gentle.
Skippy had the best theme tune, didn't it?
Skippy has the best theme tune, yes.
There was the Littlest Hobo.
The Littlest
that was a
Hobo.
dog.
Yeah, that was sort of a...
Yeah, that was a good theme tune.
Remarkable preponderance of kids falling down wells or coming, running into mishaps when Skippy happened to be in the vicinity, which I think is kind of a black mark against him. He's kind of like a kangaroo Poirot. Like whenever he turns up, you can, some small child is going to meet a terrifying fate. I would get rid. Personally.
Are you saying Skippy basically pushed them all?
Well, I just say it's not a coincidence, is it? 91 episodes, 91 terrible things happening to children there or thereabouts, and Skippy is in the vicinity of all of them.
It was never intended to make more, partly because 91 episodes was considered enough, partly because the child actor who played Sonny, Gary Pankhurst, was growing up. So at some points, that is an issue. Between 9 and 15 kangaroos were used for each show. The apparent manual dexterity was often achieved by using separate arms in the hands of human operators. Skippy's trademark noise was entirely fictional. Kangaroos make no such sounds. This is very important.
That was
a
very... You're quite good at impressions, Max, and your Jim White is second to none, but that was a very risible attempt to do Skippy there.
Could you do it for me?
I think it was more of a...
There we are. Anyway, I think that's probably enough for today, isn't it? Thanks, everybody. Thanks for your time, Johnny.
Thanks for having me.
Thank you, Simon.
Pleasure.
Thanks, Barry. We'll be back on Monday.
For more great podcasts from The Guardian, just go to theguardian.com/podcasts.